Hey, you geeks! Okay, so much to get through this week. Let's just get straight into it. Full spoilers for all Cosmere related tour released content. Into Fire. 2 weeks ago, many of you viewers really pushed back in the comments section at my concern that Shallan was putting the cart before the horse in going after the Ghost Bloods before capturing Ba'eda Mishram. Now, I don't deny that going after the Ghost Bloods is a good idea and would make Roshar a better place. It's just the order of operations. However, Sanderson seems to have anticipated my objections and gave Shallan a very convincing rebuttal in this chapter. Mraize and Iyatel are accustomed to the luxury of darkness and shadow, Shallan said. We need to expose them naked for the world to see. So long as they have a monopoly on information, they will control us. And if we're always reacting to them, never attacking, they will beat us. Even if Shallan were to, say, lure out the Ghost Bloods with the bait of Ba'eda Mishram and a gemstone, that wouldn't guarantee that all of the important Ghost Bloods will be present. They have a much better chance of catching those if they go into the fox's den, where it seems that
we have all our rotten eggs in one basket.
However, since Shallan is wanting to gather information and not just burn the place to the ground, I have my concerns as Shallan goes off alone into fire. Force 10 from Urithiru. Last week, a very perceptive viewer and reader, I might add, wondered why in the comments Team Radiant weren't sending in a strike force to sink the Bismarck, metaphorically, literally sink Odium's fleet before it reached Thalena like Shallan did in Book 2. Their concerns perked my curiosity, though I wasn't concerned yet because Chapter 18 seemed to have been about moving the big, slow armies into position, whereas the deployment of super sneaky strike forces would happen later, in the next chapter, as they did here, but not into Shadesmar, rather into Herdaz. This is clearly a bad idea, but I also see the logic of why they did it. Firstly, there's not a lot of Radiants to go around. Sigil wished they had more variety to their Radiant forces. Yes, they had Windrunners and Edge Dancers aplenty, and a growing force of Stonewards and Lightweavers. The other orders were largely empty, though. With only 2 orders able to soulcast Elf Scholars and Lightweavers, Lightweavers are a bit busy waging a quiet war with the Ghost Bloods, while the only Elf Scholar is Yasna, and she is not yet ready to join a plucky band of adventurers on an ill-conceived, ill-fated mission to unlikely victory. What is right, she said, is not so easy as swearing an oath, Uncle. It's about what brings the greatest good to the most people. And sometimes that requires making difficult decisions. So that's like the entire philosophical question of the book, right? Like, we're gonna return to that one later, I'd wager. Yasna was skeptical of a sneak attack to Herdaz, which seems more likely to succeed and therefore more likely to save more people than a sneak mission into Shadesmar. Herdaz has only been held since the beginning of Rhythm of War, whereas the Fused have held the seas between Alethkar and Thalena in the cognitive realm since the middle of Oathbringer. Thirdly, in-world, amongst our elites, only the Mink really has the brain capacity for such creative application of logic, and he's got his own biases or loyalties to his homeland. I should not like to trust our freedom to another man's sword, no matter how comically large said sword may be. You are to be commended for remembering Herdaz in your contract, Blackthorn. I no longer think you will forget us, as Alethi so often have, but you gave me a promise. I should like it fulfilled. Regardless of all logical arguments against this course of action, this is clearly the Mink's passion project, and he's gonna go with it. It also, conveniently for the plot, removes the security blanket from Sigzil and Yasna and everyone else when things go wrong once day 3 dawns. Timeline! The sibling opening up about days of ancient past gives me such joy as a historian to make one of my favorite things. A timeline. Some 6,000 years ago, when the Stones wanted a legacy in the form of a child of honor and cultivation, back when bondsmiths bonded not to Spren, but to the ancient forces left by gods. And the Stormfather was created soon before me. That's inaccurate, though, Yasna said. Dalinar speaks of the Stormfather having existed when people first came to Roshar, 7,000 years ago. This pairs so nicely with Wit's info dump on Adonalsium that I wanted in chapter 16, but I guess we got earlier with Kaladin and now in chapter 20. When this world was created, Wit said, long before honor, cultivation, or odium arrived, Adonalsium left something on it. Sometimes it's called the Old Magic. That term is applied to the Night Watcher who came with cultivation's efforts from one of those ancient Spren. Each god is a slice of a greater entity killed some 10,000 years ago, its power divided. So, to line things up chronologically, Adonalsia made the wind and the other ancient forces, or Spren if you're Wit, of Roshar some 15,000-ish years before current era. Then old Nalsi got shattered 10,000 years ago.
10,000 years will give you such a crick in the neck.
Now this is where it gets interesting. For when Yasna says that people came to Roshar 7,000 years ago, she means human people, as that is when the desolations began, according to not just the Stormfather, but Kalek, Leshwi, and Raboniel all agree on this. Raboniel said, with a soft, almost indistinguishable cadence to her words, so very, very long ago. What has it been? 7,000 years? I don't think you can comprehend how tired I am of this war, Navani. How tired all of us are. Your heralds, too. Thus the feuds and the heralds are 7,000 years old, and therefore older than the bondsmith Spren, as according to the sibling, it took honor and cultivation approximately another 1,000 years to figure out how to remake Spren into their own image, honor taking the wind, and cultivation doing something funky with the night. There's a sentence. And then both of them working with stone to make the sibling. I'm not really worried about the Stormfather remembering things before he existed, as that's kind of the wind's thing to do, as Syl told Kaladin all the way back in Words of Radiance. Were you with me back then? All that time ago? No, Syl said. And yes, it can't be both. It can. I knew I needed to find you, and the winds knew you. They led me to you. I am more concerned now, however, that the listeners still brand the Stormfather personally as the traitor. If he was not part of their god before the humans came, then he must have betrayed them after he was created during the desolations. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. The Contemplator. Dalinar is contemplating becoming a god. This is concerning on so many levels, and I am not alone on this one, as both Wit and Yasna agree with me. I have yet to know a person, Wit said, who took up one of those shards and didn't regret it, my friend. Same as any other burden of responsibility. Yes, Wit said, but orders of magnitude worse. After contemplation, giving Dalinar's idea due thought, Yasna still found herself against it. Kings were bad enough. This was far worse. Sing it with me now. It's tough to be a god.
Spread where mortals have not trod.
Now, I don't think that Dalinar is going to get a happy ending this book, but I don't think that Shardhood is his unhappy ending. If there is any happiness to be found, I think it might be in what the Stormfather, insofar as we can trust him, says. In earnest, it would seem that Dalinar can't do this. The power cannot go to one who wants it, Dalinar. You said it was impossible earlier, Dalinar said. Impossible the way you want it to happen. I find myself agreeing with the Stormfather. Dalinar is not going to revive honor this book. However, the hearts of men and singers, where honor is still said to live, is another story. Once the Stormfather goes dead-eye, as he most certainly will, his interference with Roshar's connection to what remains of honor is going to open up. And for those who truly carry honor in their hearts, they will be able to access the spiritual realm directly, thus making Roshar the first democratic deification planet in the cosmere, which is where I really see the whole endgame of the cosmere going. Just whoever is worthy and willing can carry a tiny part of God around with them. Liar, liar. There are so many liars in these chapters. First and most surprisingly is Noadan himself, though I would categorize his words or lack thereof to his fellow travelers as more omissions than outright lies. First, I dared not tell them this dusty traveler with whom they shared a meal was in fact that very king they had heard of. The second was, I did not explain that very king had abdicated his throne and walked away from his kingdom. I've already touched on Noadan's hypocrisy in this little episode, but now I'm wondering if Noadan and Dalinar are both, contemplators. As a contemplator, according to our friend Dostoevsky, is one who may suddenly, after hoarding impressions for many years, abandon everything and go off to Jerusalem on a pilgrimage for his soul's salvation. Or perhaps he will suddenly set fire to his native village. Perhaps do both. If Noadan's a contemplator who goes on pilgrimage, does that mean Dalinar is going to be the one to set fire to Roshar again? Or perhaps this new revelation is to soften our feelings towards the Stormfather, who has also been unmasked like Noadan as a liar.
My dad, he's a liar.
Characters have been saying for books that the Stormfather ain't all there, but the sibling finally gives those vague warnings a context. Now the Stormfather has changed, and the Night Watcher has not spoken to me as she used to. My siblings are no longer as I remember. I hate that. The sibling is really the first character we have to directly and clearly comment on how the nature of Roshar and the temperament of Bondsmith Spren have changed since the Recreants. Sure, the Fused have come back and said that humans have created technical marvels, but no one's remarked on the weather, weirdos. This was pointed out to me by an objector to my theory that Ba'eda Mishram's capture has caused the seasons to go all screwy. And they were right. None of the ancients have mentioned the weather because I guess they aren't from the Midwest. But now I think Shallan's pattern has broken that streak. Although not an ancient, he clearly knows something that Shallan does not. Weather had been odd since the coming of the Everstorm, and rain like this was more common. Pattern hummed softly within her jacket, though she couldn't tell why. Thus, it seems the death of Tanavast, or rather, the cause of the death of Tanavast, must have been so traumatic to not only change the weather, but the temperament of Bondsmithspren themselves, in such a way that the Stormfather itself seems to have forgotten what it is to be honorable. I cannot say if the power would accept someone like you as a host, after what happened with Tanavast. And what happened with Tanavast? Dalinar said. It's worse than I told you, Dalinar. So you lied. Yes, does that surprise you? Anger you?
What? What do you mean you're not lucky? You lied to me?
While this does seem to validate my Ba'eda Mishram recreance theory to a point, it also seems to invalidate my theory that it was a storm faker who attended Gavilar's feast. After all, finally, Dalinar's Stormfather admits his ex of Gavilar. You were supposed to be better than this. You were supposed to be better than your brother. My brother? Dalinar said, frowning. He was arrogant. I knew it. I've watched both of you for a long time. Even at his worst, though, Gavilar didn't strive for godhood. Why, Dalinar? Why must you seek this? I want to presume that Gavilar at his worst was the Gavilar we saw right before his assassination. The Gavilar who told the Spren known as Stormfather that you said you were charged with this task of finding a champion, Gavilar said. By honor. That is true. I do not speak in human ways, but still, if you become a herald, you will be tortured between returns. Why is it this doesn't bother you? Gavilar shrugged. I'll just give in. What? Give in, Gavilar said. Why stay to be tortured and potentially lose my mind? I will give up each time and return immediately. If I cannot die, I will be the greatest king this world has ever known. I guess that's technically not going for godhood, but the Lord Ruler never made such a distinction, and really I have a trouble with that. But if this is the same Stormfather in both scenes, then I see why Sanderson in the revision between what he read 2-3 years ago to what was in the book changed it from the Stormfather obsessed with finding a new herald, it seemed, to finding another champion, as finding a champion seems to be what the ongoing Dalinar's Stormfather seems to be obsessed with. This would also explain why cultivation spent thousands of years undermining what we thought was her lover's plan. Because if it ain't her lover's plan, no wonder why she wouldn't care about it.
Listen attentively, nod occasionally, and if you must speak, simply say, how do you feel about that?
Let's take a moment to appreciate that Kaladin may not feel like he's making headway with Szeth, as he is new to this whole therapist role, creating it for the first time on Roshar, as a matter of fact, but he's still getting Szeth to talk about his past that seems to be really important for therapy stuff on Earth. It's also great for the reader as we're finally getting flashback chapters imminent, which I am very excited to read. I'm also relieved that Szeth has finally clarified that his mission of cleansing is against an unmade, as he kind of omitted that little detail with Dalinar and such. For all Dalinar knows, he's just unleashed Szeth to go cleanse the council of elders that exiled Zeth, and Zeth will use Nightblood, which would not be fun. But Zeth using Nightblood to destroy the evil of an unmade would be totally fun. Artifabrian. I gotta admit, I'm feeling a bit cheated that Dalinar is getting a magical device to navigate the spiritual realm just by Wit jerry-rigging up his watch in a few sentences. Take my clock's soul, Wit said, holding up his, and connect it by a thread of power to your own clock, grounding yours in the physical realm while you travel. Wit looked at him. Poke this with Stormlight, then poke that. Try it. At least the chapter ends with Dalinar being ready to embark on the first test of this new device into the spiritual realm. And this also is lining up with Shallan embarking into the cave of the Ghost Blood, so I can rather count on both of these excrements hitting the whirly machine next week. With that, I still have hope that we're going to get a few days of Navani working on making the Rosharan aliometer to fully navigate the spiritual realm, which may be useful for Dalinar, though Honor is still probably on top of Urithiru, as many of you commenters have theorized, but we still don't know where Ba Ada Mishram is, and Shallan is going to need to find her, and fast. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe if you want to see more. Leave a comment. What are your thoughts on these latest chapters? Thanks for watching. Bye!